to sort of talk about things that we are supposed to do today. And I'm going to be talking about the China space program. Now, why is that? Because reason is that just a few days ago, they did a moonshot to go and collect some rocks from there. And it's coming back now. So in the next few days, it should be back and land back on Earth with samples of the moon. Now, two other countries have done this, which is both USA and Russia, but China is the third country to do it. And also in the process is a third country to plant its flag on the moon, not on the just one side, which we see, but also the other side as well. Because you remember some time back, they sort of sent a lander to the other side of the moon, which was the first. And that has also sort of had their flag on it. So it seems to me there's going to be some territorial disputes as well before long over there. But at the moment, what I'd like to do is to see where they are at the moment, because we hear a lot about NASA, and of course, I've talked quite a bit about Elon Musk and his rockets. Now, China is very much a quieter player. We haven't heard much about China, but I think it's worth knowing because China is making such a sort of fantastic advances in all spheres, in fact, from the technology, from the social sort of platforms and communications, and think of it, they've got it. And over Christmas, I'm going to be talking about China as a phenomena that needs to be understood. So they'll be sending you, I think, something, a timetable over Christmas about the talks that are going to be taking place then. So I'll cover China on a much more holistic base there. But today we'll look specifically on the China sort of program. Now, what they have done in the 2020 is they've launched two sort of rockets, if you like. One is the one that just went there in the last few days to the moon. And once in July, they sent off a rocket to Mars as well. So you've got them quite well, in fact, prepared with all the technology that is needed to do these type of launches and pursue the research program, and also to develop the technology as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a bit more detail as I show you my things. I'll also cover a little bit of the early history of where space program is, just to give us a little bit of a context. And then talk a little bit about the International Space Station, from which China had been excluded, which is rather interesting. Now, it sort of also strikes me as a little bit of a exclusion type of approach, which is a bit like a sanction. Now, we saw last week that the sanctions on Iran were so severe that they have pushed Iran into the arms of China very much now. Now, in the case of International Space Station, Russia and USA were there with a lot of other countries, but they excluded China with a special regulation that the Congress put out in USA, which was quite astonishing in some ways. But they said they give some reasons about spying and so on. But it seems to me that it has really accelerated the effort on China's part to advance on that front as well. So that is basically the international space, in which they also are into very much. Now, a bit more about the Moon program as to the details of it and the Mars program, and some strategic insights essentially to see what it means in terms of China having that technology. Okay, this is basically showing us a little bit about the planting of flags, if you like, in the as far as history goes, because the first one that was done was, of course, by the Soviet Union here in 1959. So you could say that was the first one that had their little marker on the moon. Then in the 70s, 74, I think 72 rather, US, of course, went with the flag. It was a manned flight, and we all remember that. So they have got that, and they had subsequent flights as well to the moon. So they're very much there with their flag. Now that Chang'e 3, they've got a series of these Chang flights by China. And the one that went just a few days ago was Chang'e 5. This is Chang 3. The Chang'e 5 2013, they went in with some lander there, and that lander had that flag on it. And then, of course, in recently, which is 2019, they've sent off that Chang 4, brought up again that flag in their lander there. And now, of course, they've got this one here, which is Chang'e 5, and that is going to be returning back from the moon with rock samples in the next few days. There's the lander with its flag there on the moon. That's the lander, the whole picture of that with the thing there. Now this is NASA doing it in 72. We saw that. There we go. That's the original pictures that NASA had of the two astronauts, walking around on the moon here. Now, this is the International Space Station from which China was excluded. It's a pretty big one. It's coming to the end of its life, actually. So in a way, unless this thing is renewed, China's new station will be the one which is going to be up to date. And by 2023, I think they're going to have it fully operational. Now, this is a NASA effort by the other countries who have participated in the ISS, the 15 nations, in fact. So all these flags over here, you can see even the little Switzerland is there. But in terms of China, it's excluded. Okay, this is the regulation that the US Congress passed, which excludes China. And the reason given was that China had used a rocket to blast off one of the satellites, one of its own satellites in space, which caused a lot of debris and so on. But it seems to me that they felt that it was strategic sort of display, and therefore they wanted to exclude them from the ISS. So the ISS was excluded. But they kept Russia because NASA didn't get the funds after 70s to continue with the moon missions and so on. And that's why, so for the last, since then, nobody has gone to the moon. But Russia was the one who was able to have the rockets to ferry the astronauts or the cosmonauts to the ISS, to the International Space Station. So that's why the cooperation with China, with Russia went along with USA and other countries, but not with China. So despite being banned from the ISS, China continues to rapidly advance their space program. So that's a sort of an incentive for them to have taken off in a way. And that's their space station. Will be 1/5 the size of the ISS. It'll be much smaller, but they'll keep on adding modules as they go along. And it's not completely operational as yet. Now, this is their whole sort of program, China's plans on space. One is the orbiting of the moon, which they've done already here in 2007. They're just going around the moon. Soft landing on the moon, 2010 and 2013. So that's the picture here of that soft landing. And step 3, a sample return, which is going to be actually now. I think that was delayed. So it is happening now. Now that's the little rover, the lander, that goes around once it on the moon. It has all these gadgets on it. It has these panoramic camera, navigation camera here, mechanical arm, which you can't see too well over here, this one, that sort of can go into the ground and scoop up uh, subsoil type of rocks and put it back into one of these containers over here, which can then sort of come back. Yeah, the wheels here, the battery, solar power, the antenna for transmission. So that's a little idea about what these landers look like. So once it has landed, soft landing, uh, and it goes around a bit, it has a bit of a range that it can go. And then it picks up the rocks and then puts it into this thing there, and then gets back to the orbit vehicle, which is going around the moon. And then, of course, what they're going to have is also a moon base before long. This is going to be after 2017. It'll be after 2020 now, 21. So you can see they've got long-term plans, and will certainly sort of, be seeing China on the moon before long. That's a bit of a detail on one of the earlier ones of the thing that went to the moon in 2013. When was it? Earlier phase, 2013. Yeah. These are all the markings of all the other vehicles that have gone in from USA and from Russia. These are the Russian ones, the US ones that have landed on the moon at various times. And Chang'e 3 is there. And now we've got Chang'e 5. Another bit of thing about the lander. And this is the one that went over, and this is the scooping arm. The whole weight of this thing is about 120 kilograms. And it can go up to 200 meters per hour. So it can't go whizzing around, but it does have the facility to sort of move around. And it covers an area of 3 square kilometers. And it's got a mission of 3 months that it can be there doing that mission. And it can scan moon subsurfaces to depths of over 100 meters. So it can look quite far below the subsurface. So they get to know a lot about this. In fact, one of the things that India also sent a lander which crashed actually, but they have found, India sort of launch found there was water on the moon. I think it's below the surface. Now those are the real pictures of these landers and those things that scoop up things. Yeah, there's the arm that goes down. It drills down, so it goes down below there, and then brings it back and puts it into the little container down there, which comes back. Now so once the container is filled with the rocks, then it takes off. The whole lander doesn't take off, but part of the lander takes off to meet with the orbiter that is there. So when they join up, and then they are able to then come back to Earth, which is here. Yeah, there's the orbiter and the Accenture thing that has collected the samples. They join up, and then from there they come back. Yeah, this is just collecting the samples. This is a schematic of the space station. So you can't see much because especially written in Chinese names only there. That's their space station, giving us some little metrics on that: 60 tons, 4 meters sort of diameter. Launch weight of each module is about 20 tons. So you can see the rockets can carry quite heavy stuff. because we saw that Elon Musk's rocket can carry up to 100 tons. So 20 tons is quite manageable by the Chinese here. That's basically their program from 1956 right up to 2010 only, which is the various stages of how they have gone through. I won't go through that. You can have a look at your leisure there. These are the sites in China, which they sort of launch from and then get the things back from to land. Well, I put that in really to sort of say that one of the things that when we talk about the International Space Station not having, the Chinese on board, it's also the same type of thinking here. The Chinese trade war has been engaged in a very harsh way by Trump. And of course, with Biden coming in, he has promised that he will nevertheless pursue the policy, but probably not in the way that Trump has done, because Trump has done it in such a way as to ruffle everybody's feathers and mostly China. So I think what every nation wants is a bit of a dialogue which can be conducted in some sort of civil fashion. So with Biden coming in, we'll be back to the old diplomacy again. Okay, some of the programs that they've got are these, which I'll show very quickly later on about what the objectives of these launches are. The satellites that have been launched for mapping, for high resolution mapping of the Earth below. Telecommunication, because we heard a lot about Huawei, how Huawei is going to increase 100 times the speed of our communication down on Earth. But they want to try and build a similar type of capacity where the satellite can communicate with this 5G type of technology. So they put satellites of that type up there. And of course, they've launched already the Mars rocket. It's on its way already. I think it's going to arrive there next February, because and they launched it, I think, in July this year. And of course, they're going to be monitoring from Earth these rockets and their progress, and they use very, very sort of sophisticated type of communication. And these are the rock samples that, of course, are going to be returned. So we'll go through that very quickly. Here, that satellite that is going on, mapping satellite, it's high resolution mapping satellite into space. And that is going to sort of give, a lot of high resolution on Earth. High definition 3D images and multispectral data. So essentially a very technically sound type of research going on there. And it will also be helpful to look at natural disaster prevention type of thing. And that, I think, has to do with monitoring the weather. In fact, I just heard yesterday that China has come up with a type of extreme technology which enables them to control the weather of regions on the Earth. You may recall that in the Olympics, when they had the Peking Olympics, there was fear that it would rain and so on. So what they did was they did cloud seeding so as to take away the moisture from the cloud, so that, over the Olympic period, it was dry. So they have extended the technology now to even beyond to where they are fighting. They got the fighting forces in Ladakh, for instance. So the thinking there is that, Ladakh has a very cold temperatures and lots of snow and so on, and their troops are there. And what they're thinking they might do is that if they control the weather of that area there a little bit, they might have, good weather for their troops, but bad weather for their enemies. So that is the fear now. So we'll have to see how successful they're going to be doing that. And of course, agricultural development. China is very much into greening of the desertification that is taking place on northern China. I think in one of my earlier lectures, we had talked about it as to what a green belt that they're trying to create over there. 4,000, I think, miles long and 1,500 miles or kilometers rather wide. So humongous effort there to desertify that area, to make it green. So these satellites will do all that job to put them as to how things are shaping up there. And of course, they're going to be managing the water resources. We had talked about, I think, once before that they were connecting. The two big rivers, the Wang Ho and the other one, Xinjia, the other, forget the name. These two are linked together now so as to give water to this huge city they're building for 130 million people in northern China near Peking. It's called Jingjingji. I think we talked about it in one of my earlier lectures there. So environmental survey, urban planning, so all this sort of thing that they can do by having good information on a large scale. So these are commercial satellites, of course, as they're going to be sending up. That's for the broadband communication. This is all to do with the internet. And they will be covering specifically this Asia Pacific region. And you can look at the speeds here. We're talking about 50 gigabytes per second. That's with the satellite, and each single beam has a capacity of 1 gigabyte. So quite a big capacity in terms of communication. This is the Mars mission that they have launched. That was last July. And you've got these 3 or 4 fuel tanks. They fall off as this thing goes up. And the purpose of this space program is, of course, first of all, to go into orbit in Mars, then do a landing, then do some roving around, and then scientific exploration. And the mission is called Tianwen. It's got a meaning in Chinese. We'll come to that later on as to what that means. It's a mission to completely orbit, land, and rover so as to gather data on the red planet. So quite well done. So it's already on its way now. Now, this is a 7-month journey to Mars once you take off. Mars and Earth, their orbits don't sort of really are the same. Because of their distances, apart, our orbit is smaller than Earth's orbit, Mars orbit. So we can only come close to Mars once every 2 years. And that's when you need to fire off a rocket towards Mars, because it takes 7 months for that journey to take place. So here are the objectives again laid down here. Orbiting, separating the landing platform and rover from the orbiter, landing softly and roving. So basically what it is, you can see that it takes off from the Earth, goes around, and then goes in ever decreasing circles until the red planet is close enough, I suppose, and lands. That's a landing sort of thing there in February 2021. That's when the Chinese lander will be hitting the surface. It's a 7-month journey. So it's 2 to 3 months. It will be a Mars orbit. So that orbiting station around the Mars is going to be there for 2 to 3 months before it either sort of comes down. Then once it comes on the surface, you've got the potential for doing some surveying. There's that landing. That's how it looks. So again, basically what it's going to do there once it gets there. I just thought I might show you some pictures of the real sort of things there. Whole process of landing will last about 7 to 8 minutes. So from the orbit to the surface, it comes on fairly fast. There we are. Some more of those pictures there. Okay, skip that. Yeah, skip that, skip that. It's the same. Yes, the name of that launch vehicle, Tianwen, it means questions to heaven. And it came from a poem 2000 years ago by Ku Yan, apparently, ancient China's most celebrated poet. So they took the word from that. Okay, they're going to be tracking, of course, that whole Tianwen by using these advanced technologies. Yeah. Okay, it will. So it's the same thing that I've mentioned. Some more pictures. Yeah, this is coming back with samples from the moon. This is again just pictures of some of these things. Okay. Okay, I'm going to unmute all of you. Oh, you'll have to unmute yourself. I can't do it from here. Yeah. Okay, I can see all of you. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Good, good. I can hear you as well. More important.
has a question.
But I can hear you. Go ahead. If you have any questions, we can talk about it. Yeah, Mary. You have to put your audio on. Mary?
On, can't you hear me?
Not
Very
really.
quiet.
Oh, you have to unmute yourself.
I'm not muted.
Maybe turn your volume up.
Oh, look, someone else.
Yeah.
Someone else asked the question.
Yeah, we can hear you faintly.
Yeah, well, what I wanted to know was what sort of a relationship does the European Union have with China? Although we're leaving the EU, I just want.
Yeah, thankfully, Europe is more sensible in its outlook and therefore considers China to be a partner in many ways and not an antagonist. Yes, competitor in so many ways, but not an antagonist. So the cooperative scope is quite good, and they hope to include China in a lot of the efforts that the EU is involved in. And China is very amenable to that. It doesn't necessarily want to sort of keep away from the international sort of engagement.
But we don't know, our relationship will have to be reset now that we're leaving, I'm assuming. Is that the case?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we are going to be seeing in Brexit is that, you know, we've got a very real problem of maybe having a very minimal type of deal if it is announced. That would leave us with practically, having to not be so close to Europe. And I think we talked about how I think the red lines that are put in, one is the Irish border and the other one is about the state aid and the fishing. They're all, not going to be resolved 100%. And therefore the attitude will be quite different between the EU and UK. And I think UK will probably find that as far as international relations and trade agreements are concerned, that EU will have the advantage over UK because it's a much larger market, and therefore anything that UK might want to sort of have any relationship of a sort with a third country, they will not be as, if you like, as welcome as the EU by the third country. So we are going to have to find some means of being able to achieve what we want, because that's what the country voted for. And I don't think the country knew what it really wanted, if you ask me. And therefore, Johnson will have a job trying to meet that requirement of Brexit voters, and also see whether he is not going to shoot UK in the foot itself. Yeah. Yeah,
Shafiq.
Maureen. Sorry, Maureen?
Briefly, if China is planning to build this base on the moon, I mean, is there any kind of international agreement that you have to negotiate how much you can do to another body in space? I mean, I assume there was some kind of international agreement some time ago.
I think sooner or later, I think countries will have to come together to come to an agreement. But, you know, it never is one of those cases where you sort of adopt a sensible approach to anything. You go by the seat of your pants and then finally come to an agreement. And I think this is going to be the same case, because it's a power game, really. You could see that happening in the polar sort of routes and the resources that are there in the poles, as to who should have access to it and who not. You know, all those sort of questions which have to do with international sharing and working, it doesn't come about. Even in this vaccine effort, you saw that international didn't come through too quickly. And it has a lot to do with the leadership. You know, when the leadership is missing, and in USA has been the leader in many ways, but of course it was missing in the last 4 or 5 years. But before that, Obama and Gordon Brown worked very well in trying to, you know, resolve the financial crisis of 2008. So maybe with a bit of good leadership, we might see more international cooperation coming about. Yeah, Nimi, sorry.
Actually, I was going to ask the same question as Maureen, which was, are there any international regulations that govern any of this, or is it a complete free-for-all?
At the moment, it's a free-for-all, I think. Because, people are sending their rockets up. Even UAE sent off a rocket to Mars, I think. I'm not sure what the intention behind that is. It's a laughable effort, I think. Giselle.
I was going to ask a related question, which is just really, to what extent are they sharing information? Because I know you're saying that there's all this research into the soil, into the water, and it seems crazy that if these countries are all working alone on more or less the same thing, do they share information?
I think when there is some will to sort of come together, countries do. You remember when we had that ozone layer problem, when the hole was getting bigger and bigger? It was because of this, what do they call them? Chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs. They went up into the atmosphere and ate away the oxygen layer, which is only 2 millimeters thick, would you believe? 2 millimeters thick only, which gives us the whole protection from ultraviolet radiation. So when that 2 millimeter thick layer started to get bigger, the hole, ultraviolet rays were coming, and therefore they got together very quickly and banned the CFC, you know, the chlorofluorocarbons, which go into refrigerators and things like that. So when there is a will and some good leadership, one can do a lot. In fact, if you, I've been reading this Hariri's Sapiens, the graphical sort of booklet, which talks about how the Sapiens managed to overcome great sort of enemies, and the big enemy, or sort of better equipped in some ways were the Neanderthals, who had bigger brains, and they were bigger, but yet the sapiens, they were smaller, but they were managed, they used their brains to try and come together as a group and overcome their obstacles. And that's how the Neanderthals lost out. So if human beings have this capacity to come together, I think they can solve problems, and they know it. And it's just that there are some people who throw the spanner in the works to try and get an advantage, that we see this political games being played, you know. I'm
Is
hopeful.
there,
Yeah, Jim. Sorry.
Shafiq, is there any literature? I'm sorry, somebody else speaking. I was just going to ask if there's any literature on pollution, etc., caused by these rockets and things going into space. You know, we're told we shouldn't fly, but presumably that must be much more powerful, the things that are flying out of.
I think as with technology, there's always a solution, because it creates the problem, it solves the problem as well. Now, if you remember in one of the Elon Musk's lectures or talks that we did, this space starship that he's building, it's a humongous thing, carries over 100 tons. And one of the things that I heard him mention was that it could also be used as a vacuum cleaner, as it were, of collecting all the debris in orbit and then bring it back to Earth, you know, with the starship. This starship seems to be a fantastic sort of thing. It's still under development. It hasn't sort of, you know, gone up more than a few hundred feet so far. But before long, the tests are going to be, you know, in the next few weeks or months. It's slated to go up to 15-kilometer height and then return, you know. So that functionality is not the only functionality Elon Musk is talking about. He says these starships can also act as a space station by joining them up. And of course, you know, because they're humongous things. So there are plenty of uses. And I think the debris problem could also be solved, I think, that way. Sorry, Jim.
Yeah, in terms of surviving in space, I just read an article about the Chinese using genetic modification for their armies, and this CRISPR-9. I'm not sure if you've heard this. It's CRISPR technology. Do you know anything about that? How the Chinese hope to use CRISPR technology, gene editing, to help them survive in space? Because they're using it for their armies. That's what I read. I'm not sure how true it is.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised about that, because some of that information is not easily forthcoming. I know one thing that I read was that they had injected into the, you know, a grain size type of little thing into the stray dogs in China, so as to track them and locate them, you know, because that little grain size type of thing gave out signals as to where these dogs are, and the dog catcher would go and pick them up and not have any nuisance in that regard. So I wouldn't be surprised if CRISPR would also find use, because I think a lot of people are working on splicing the DNA in such ways as to bring about changes to the DNA in the manner that they want. So that is a very much open area, and a lot of work is being done on that. You see, as with any technology, it can be put to either good use or bad use. And that's the history of mankind. You take a knife, you can either stick it or cut onions with it.
That's why when I read the article about using it to strengthen our, you know, make their army more resilient and can cope with hot and cold weather conditions, I was shocked. Actually,
yeah, well, India is at the moment shivering, because in those heights of Ladakh, it goes to minus 40 degrees, and they don't have the clothing for them to sort of wear. And the Chinese have come there with all sorts of very fancy clothes. quite a game going on over there.
Quite interesting about Japan. I mean, they've sent their probe to the asteroid and brought back samples.
That's right. That was quite
Amazing. A little bit of, you can see the surface of the asteroid just looks like a desert, you know, like an Earth terrain, just lots of rocks lying around.
Yeah, apparently that is going to give us a clue as to the origins of universe.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see what they find from those rocks coming back. How long is it going to take? Because it was quite far away, wasn't it? That
It was
asteroid.
billions of miles, but I think
5
they're
billion.
landing in Australia quite soon.
Soon. Oh, okay. Well, we
can't-
might get to see something then.
Yeah.
Mm.
So-
Well, it's also a question of, I think when the moon rocks come back, there was a question that was put out, will China give some rocks to other countries to sort of test? But one of the things that I remember, Nixon, when he went to China, he gave a rock from the moon. Was it Nixon or thereafter somebody? They gave a rock to China. So China may then sort of, you know, share their rocks with others. Let's see. We'll see.
I think we've got some in the Science Museum.
Have we? All right, there you are.
Yeah.
Well, aren't we supposed to do some tests on it?
I don't know what they've done with it. It's in a case on display. Probably had a look at it.
Okay. Yes, Ross, you're saying something. Oh, it's switched off. I see. Okay, June, you well there? Can't hear you because your audio is off. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, I'm well.
Okay, right. Who else is here? There is Susanna. Yeah, Vizi. Yeah.
There was the other thing about protecting the human DNA from the cosmic rays out in space. I can't remember if we spoke about this before, but you know that without having a magnetic field, your DNA is not protected from the bombardment. Everybody, I mean, we're all protected because the Earth happens to have a magnetic field, but Mars doesn't have one, and I don't think the Moon has. So when you land there, or if you're in the space station, your DNA is being bashed around. So I'm not sure how, maybe the CRISPR thing, you know, maybe we should get resistant
Yeah.
DNA.
That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
Maureen, what happens to your DNA? I thought DNA more or less doesn't change.
Oh yeah, no, you can damage your DNA.
So what parts of it may break off and not come together again.
Rays. I mean, there's continuous flow of particles out of the sun into space. Helium, nuclei, and electrons, and all kinds of stuff, plasma, and it impacts on the Earth, but it doesn't get inside, it doesn't come down to the surface because it's deflected by the magnetic field of the Earth. But if you're up in space, or on Mars or wherever, then you've got no protection from it. I mean, you won't feel it, but you will have damage. And I think they found in, I don't know if they will have been looking at people who've been up in space and gone to the ISS, and Tim Peake and all these guys.
Yeah, some of them had been in that space station for months on end, I think.
Yeah, they must be getting damage. And I think it does something to your eyesight. They get eye damage, and sometimes it's irreversible.
Is that even wearing the spacesuits, you know, the heavy, because they're wearing such protective gear, aren't they?
Yeah,
but doesn't help to deflect any of it?
No, I don't think it does the job.
Can they create a magnetic field within
They
space?
might. I don't know. I mean, I presume they'd have a go. Apparently Mars used to have one. They found some evidence, but it's gone. Now there isn't one now.
But you know, the magnetic field, even on Earth, is so sort of weak. We don't feel it actually, although our systems sort of recognize it. I know a lot of birds navigate using those magnetic lines. But if it's so weak, it would not necessarily be a humongously big problem to provide that magnetic field in the spaceship itself. when the spaceships are on long trips, like months and years.
Yeah, but apparently they think there are caves and tunnels on the moon, and maybe also on Mars. So if they're going to set up a base, they might go underground.
Yeah. Well, I think there was at one time this Van Allen belt that was around the Earth that was very had radiation, and I think they've managed to now, not mention too much about it. I call it the Van Allen belt. You remember?
Oh yeah, yeah,
1670s. Yeah, that we don't hear about at all nowadays. I think we've somehow overcome the problem, I think.
But when you think about the hole in the ozone layer, I mean, if you're up in space, you haven't got any ozone at all. You're going to be bashed around by all the other radiation, X-rays and
that's right.
alpha particles.
But the fact that only a 2 millimeter thick film can protect us tells us that, it's such a fragile type of Earth environment that a little bit of imbalance, and that would be the end of the species. That's why I'm very happy that Elon Musk is thinking about Mars.
I think he's the main man, is he?
Yeah. Well, for Shafiq, he is definitely.
Well, I'm also very thankful to him because his Tesla shares have done me a lot of good as well.
And he's one of the third richest man in the world now or something, isn't
Got a
he?
lot of money.
Second richest.
Second.
And soon to overcome the Bezos.
Oh.
Because,
So who is the very richest? Who is the most rich?
well, Bezos, the Amazon guy at the moment.
Man, isn't it?
Of course he will.
And second is Elon Musk. Now, the difference between them is quite stark. Amazon believes in sort of, increasing consumers' sort of habits and makes lots of money, whereas
Yes.
Elon Musk has a vision, and he's working towards a vision, which is astonishing, that even anybody in history who has a grand vision can actually start to deliver that.
Yeah.
See?
Have you
So-
seen the work they're doing on the island of Orkney? And these houses have got a Tesla battery bolted to the outside of the house. And if they get wind power or solar, they
Solar
can
power, yeah.
store it. They're massive, great things. They're about 3 feet high.
Yes.
So they can. If you go online and just look up Orkney Eco or something, and there's the other thing they're doing is tidal power. So they've got. You probably know about this, Shafiq. Under the there's a huge tidal draw between the islands, and they've got these like turbines in the water that are generating huge amounts of energy. But it's storing it, isn't it, is the problem. You can generate like wind power when the wind goes away,
That's right.
flow of energy.
That's why these batteries are so important. And
Yeah,
those
yeah,
battery
they're putting in
advancement
these
is coming
amazing-
in leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And I think it's a very good prospect that we can look forward to having the energy problem solved once and for all.
Yeah.
I mean, there's talk about the hydrogen and all that. I can't see much sense in that. But yet there seems to be so much. You remember the last Monday talk I think we had? He talked about hydrogen power mostly.
Yes.
Whereas he hardly mentioned so much about the batteries, which are the crucial element in the sustainable energy equation. Because you can develop power, hydro, whatever, solar or wind power or whatever, but to be able to store it and use it is the big question. And the way that the hydrogen thing works is that while the power is available, you then do the electrolysis of the water and get hydrogen out of it, and then save that hydrogen and then use it again. I mean, it seems to be such a cumbersome process to me.
Yeah.
But yet some people are talking about hydrogen all the time.
I thought it was very interesting how you said they're going to try and control the weather, the Chinese, through this mapping.
Yeah, well, one of the things that has terrified the enemy, especially India, is that the Chinese paper said that they have now, the Chinese have the equipment and the means to control the weather of a region bigger than India.
My goodness.
My goodness.
5.5 million square miles. They say they can do this.
Oh,
I think the whole world is going to go upside down if they do that. Because if
oh,
you change the
absolutely.
weather, then we are going to be affected. Perhaps you might get rid of our winters from here, perhaps.
Mm.
There's that thought as well.
They could probably set up, you know, they could sell you whatever weather you want. They could program your weather.
That's
for a
right.
fee.
But it'd be good
That,
for
that would
climate.
have a huge effect on agriculture and
Yeah.
what
Oh,
countries can produce and just so much also power, because that means that we won't have to have lots of the air conditioning or the heating. The knock-on effects could be
The thing about this this is that if you change the weather of one place, it's going to change the weather of other places as well.
It's
yeah.
a zero-sum game, yeah.
The knock-on effect is quite scary, really.
yeah.
Well, the bad thing today, it was on the radio today about the ice melting in the Alps.
Mm. Yeah.
All the big glaciers are melting, and they say that there'll be no water. They must rely on the water from those things.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole eco of that whole area will.
Yeah, they say that the Sahara was very green at one time.
It's supposed to have
And
been,
that
yeah.
time was when the magnetic pole changed from north to south, which apparently happens, you know, in geological times, and that it switches because the iron core that is there in the center of the earth, when it sort of, you know, changes a bit, it changes the polarity apparently.
Yeah.
And that polarity was the one that brought about the desertification of Africa. Before that, it seems to be a green sort of, you know, place altogether.
Yeah.
They
Well,
used to call
Sahara
it
used to be green, didn't
the Fertile Crescent, didn't they, in the Middle East? Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we have all these lovely thoughts to think about.
Nightmares.
You won't sleep now.
You know,
I
if
don't
you're
know
talking to Christmas,
live to go to Mars or the moon or anywhere. It's not on my holiday list.
Oh,
Absolutely
do you
not.
think Saga will do it?
Let me just excuse me, put some light
They
on.
won't care about the DNA, will they?
No.
To put some light on. Dark.
It's very dark.
in your
Yeah,
talks,
sorry, I missed that. What was that?
in your talks on Christmas, will you be talking about how the people, the Chinese, the average person in the street feels about it? What's the story they've got? Are they behind what's going on? It'll be interesting. You know what
Oh,
I
you mean how aware are they?
Yeah, but how are they behind? How many percent of the people are behind what's going on? Whereas
Oh,
if-
you see, but they have a different form of government, as you know. They have only a one-party government.
yeah, but it's just the
Communist
people, the people's
Party.
mentality. The people's
Jim,
mentality.
I think they'd be frightened to say.
Exactly.
They
Yeah.
wouldn't say anything negative because they'll disappear at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
No, but it's just interesting. I mean, historically, what's the mentality of the Chinese? You know what I mean?
And how would we know? They're not going to tell us.
That's what I'd be interested in.
They're
know.
too
How do
frightened
you
to.
get there? In other words.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing I know is that if I go to a Chinese restaurant, I know a couple over here. The food is not normally bad, but the waiter's service is astonishingly rude.
the wrong places.
Especially if you go to Wonkies.
That's right. That's the one I had in mind. Now I see you know the place, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
Of course, you
Famous.
talk about
I go there for a takeaway. I don't know. I'm going to have a meal. I just said, I'll take the food home.
you've heard the joke
Where
about
is
the
it?
moon. I mean, they're not going to build
That's
any.
in Soho,
Oh,
In Chinatown.
Chinatown.
They're not going to build any nightclubs on the moon.
Everybody
China.
seems to know that place now.
Mhm.
You know, I went there once and told him, look, I want to sit over there. He said, no, you can't sit there. You sit here. Is that-
Stop arguing.
Very good. Mhm.
Well, okay, we're all set for our Christmas then.
Yep.
I'm going to give 2 talks over Christmas period
Oh, yeah.
because
Great,
the office asked for me to do
Mhm.
something. One is, of course, I told you, I'm going to talk about China, a phenomena that we need to understand, because then I'm going to look at it holistically, not just the space program and things like that. And the other one is, of course, Elon Musk, a game changer in our
Yay.
lives. And I'm going to look at and see how much of a change is going to be affecting our lives.
Wow.
What are the dates of these talks, Sadiq, please?
What is?
What are the
dates?
dates of these? There's next week.
I didn't understand.
When are you giving these talks? What
Oh,
day?
one's on the 20, there's a Christmas period from the 21st to the 31st, I think. So it's during that period. I think my thing is going to be on the 24th, I think, and the 30th, I think.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, they're going to send out the note on that.
Be on the list.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
Great.
yeah.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shafiq.
Okay,
Yes, thanks, Shafiq.
Bye.
thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
me, and
Stay
a
safe,
nice,
everybody.
lively conversation as usual.
Yeah.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
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 Bye.